build what we've already built. So.
Yeah. And it's frustrating with Jack the whole time. We know that we had a meeting with Blue Sky like a year and a half ago. We know that they're aware of Hive, yet they can't adopt it. They want to build their own version, say it's theirs, and then call it Web 5. Personally, I find it quite insulting.
They want to take everything they can and then remove the one bit that makes it censorship resistant. Yeah. That's what they want.
And then say that, and then they get mass adoption, they'll say, "Oh, we invented this," but ultimately in the back end, they'll still have control, and that's the issue.
Scary thing.
One is from Blockworks. And Blockworks say, Justin, Jack Dorsey, TBD, announces Web 5, a decentralized web platform built on Bitcoin blockchain. Interesting. So many things wrong in that statement. It's just how much time have we got today? And then TBD and an extra decentralized web. So it's because it's Web 5, it's extra decentralized. I don't know if it's a troll and he's trying to because I get it, he needs to separate himself from all the Web3 shit that he's personally labelled as bullshit, So, okay, skipping to Web 5. But yeah, what's your thoughts on this initially? And we can go into a little bit more detail on
it. When I first heard it, I thought for sure it was a troll. And then I started reading more into it and then seeing that Jack was behind it. And obviously, I still think it's a troll, but they're taking it so seriously. They're not doing it in a trollish way at all. And of course, the infrastructure they laid out sounded, very Lightning Network-esque, the same issue. Basically, a bring your own node model. And I made a tweet to it that was kind of, it was basically, I was reading what they're talking about getting into. And he has this anti-coin philosophy except for Bitcoin. So it's a very strange mentality to think, oh, well, the Bitcoin's blockchain to secure the store of value needs a native cryptocurrency. But to secure what he's calling the identity layer, aka Hive, he's saying, oh, you don't need a crypto to secure the identity layer. You can just rely on us, big corporations, to run the nodes for you, and then you can use our services as you want. It's like, oh, okay, that sounds very similar to Web 2, does it not? Yeah, it's just a chasing of the tail. At this point, I believe that it's intentional. He's built a business around monetizing and harvesting users' data. I don't think that decentralizing the identity layer with its own crypto is it doesn't behoove him. It's not good for him because then he loses control. Because he's like, oh, now people don't need me to run the infrastructure because they can be incentivized to run the infrastructure themselves. Now I'm completely cut myself out. So that doesn't make any sense. So let's just be anti-crypto for the identity layer, but pro-crypto for the store value layer, Bitcoin.
This is what
very conflicting.
This is what I love about Bitcoin maxis, man. It's so if you're a Bitcoin maxi, you have to avoid the conversation about governance and voting. You have to avoid the conversation about distribution of governance rights, and you have to avoid the conversation about okay, they're giving the social media accounts away on a layer without a cryptocurrency, but how do you do governance? How do you do governance? How do you do value distribution to the most valuable people in the community? Without Bitcoiners being in charge of who gets paid for what, right? I'm a Bitcoiner myself, but I'm certainly not a Bitcoin maxi. Bitcoin just has no solution to those, and nor does a cryptoless or a blockchainless system, Web3 system. We have our own equivalent of that in the Ceramic accounts in many ways. The Ceramic accounts are off-chain accounts. They will be able to try. But the great thing about this is because we'll be able to tie into Hive, we'll be able to clear on Hive and transact. So you'll run side chains on the Ceramic layer, and then you'll be able to clear Ethereum transactions and Bitcoin transactions without actually having a Bitcoin account. Right? You'll just be able to do it via the Ceramic accounts that are all off chain. So that's a very similar thing in many ways, but I don't think they won't be able to get to that point because they won't have anything like Hive to clear it on. But yeah, just like the governance side of it, you have to have a way to govern your ecosystem.
I was listening to Adam Back, and he's a popular Bitcoin maximalist podcaster. I forget his name. Peter something. Um, they were talking, and it was like a 3 week old. And I was actually going to do a reaction video. I considered doing these lately because there's just so much content to react to. And they were talking about the new upgrade to Bitcoin that's been very controversial. And it's funny because Peter was like, "Well, you have a shirt that says trust, don't verify." He's saying, "But I can't read the code, so I have to trust somebody, and so I trust somebody with the most reputation." And then Adam turned around and says, "Well, I have to agree with you because there's some things that I don't understand about the code, and I have to trust somebody who has built good reputation." And they just went on to talk about that, and I was like, "Oh," and in my head, I'm thinking, "Oh, so you don't delegate proof of stake, right? I delegate my vote to somebody I trust because I can't do it myself." But in this way, it's not some like jungle mentality where it's like, "Oh, this faction deems this person," and it's like it's real messy because there's nothing on paper to say who votes for who. It's more like Twitter or whatever saying, "Oh, this guy has reputation. Adam trusts him. That's good enough for me." Instead of having a distributed voting mechanism where it's very clear. And then you also have to decentralize this because it's not. You can have an Adam Beck like character who people look up to, and if you view him as like a proxy on delegated proof of stake, he'd have like 90% of the voting power. He'd be a centralizing force if it was just him. But delegated proof of stake forces 20 Adam backs. So even if you had an Adam back like character, he still has to appease to 2/3 of the top 20 witnesses. So the DPoS, with that 20 in place, forces a censorship resistance and decentralization in the governance that you just can't have any other way, because at the end of the day, the free market likes 2 or 3 people, maybe even one, and they're going to listen to that person, like a Vitalik like character, like, just there's going to be that person who has abnormal sway in the network. And if you don't have parameters there, you're looking at a DPoS with one person. If you're talking about skill and knowledge, people have to look up to this person. That creates kings and queens, right? We don't want that. We want to at least have these people who may have 90%, right? You could say, "Oh, block trades might have 90% of the voting power. Like he's one of the most respected witnesses, but he's one of 20, and he has the power of one of 20. He doesn't have the power of a one-on-one." And that's an important distinction when Bitcoin maxis are saying, "Oh, well, we're just going to go with the person with the most reputation." That's incredibly centralizing if you don't force it, force a parameter of a dozen plus in there. So that's one way.
Yeah, ultimately, DPoS it's the same principle, except effectively it equalizes out the top reputation between the top 20 nodes, rather than having one guy that's got. So yeah, you could argue that in our ecosystem, the top dev is block trades, and a lot of people trust and follow him, but a lot of people disagree with him as well. And the problem is that he's got in this sense is that he's never going to become a godlike character because he's got an equal say to the other 20 people that are voted in by the community, even if they've got less stake delegated to them, Yeah, so it's an equalising thing. So it's a good point you make, Dan. Ultimately, I think that DPoS is still superior. It's far superior. How can you? I still can't see any holes in it. I really can't see any holes in it. As long as it's done responsibly and the community is awake and it keeps its eye on what's going on. Yeah. So Web 5 is going to be very, very interesting. They're basically going to start running it and just saying, "Look, everyone can run social media accounts now." I of course am open to integrating this stuff into the stuff that we're doing. I like to think.
Well, it sounds like the Speed network without an incentive layer. It sounds like you're going to have an off-chain index where you have to run your node, and everyone that runs that node is going to be able to see the content and interact with the thing. And it's like, oh, that's cool. We've
just built that.
The problem is they have no crypto backing it, so it's like who's going to run the nodes. It's not going to be Joe and Mary. It's going to be Google and Facebook. So it's very obvious where that's going. Anyone who doesn't see that hasn't been paying attention.
Yeah, and the other side as well, we've basically built this on Ceramic Network. These are off-chain accounts. They're already integrated into DBuzz. DBuzz has done a great job of working with us to get that up and running. You're going to be able to, any platform's going to be able to integrate those off-chain accounts. And I just think it's a far superior system because
we've already built Web 5.
We've already built. That's the point.
He's building. He's trying to build what we've already built. So.
Yeah. And it's so, I mean, it's frustrating with Jack the whole time. You know, we know that we had a meeting with Blue Sky like a year and a half ago. We know that they're aware of Hive. Yet they can't adopt it. They want to build their own version and say it's theirs, and then call it Web 5. I find it, you know, personally, I find it quite insulting.
They want to take everything they can and then remove the one bit that makes it censorship resistant.
Yeah,
That's what they want.
And then say that, and then get once they
Yeah.
get mass adoption, they'll say, "Oh, we invented this," but ultimately in the back end, they'll still have control. You know,
And
that's
that's
the
a
issue.
scary thing because we're in a situation where I forgot what movie it was, but there gets to a point where nobody knows the science. Nobody knows like
Yeah,
the hardcore data. So then it's kind of like you have these kings and queens where it's like you have the commoners or the you know the people who don't know have to trust these people, and then it's like their word versus theirs, and then it becomes who's a better arguer, who sounds more confident, not about who knows the facts. So it's very scary to go down this world because they could become these people saying this is decentralization, and the masses will believe it. They're like, oh, this is
right.
decentralization. Then we'll come along and say we're decentralization. We're like, oh, well, which one's telling the truth? We don't know. Who do we trust more? Then it becomes
Well,
politics all over again, and we have to
yeah,
realize that's the dirty game we're currently playing.
that's what it's been. I mean, it's felt dirty for the last 8 months since they've been tarnishing the name of Web 3. It's felt very, very dirty, and now it's starting to become apparent as to where they're going with this. The only way that any of this gets proven is by it being attacked. You know, the
Yep.
technology's got to be attacked, and we've got to prove. And I welcome the technology that we're building on the Speak Network to be attacked and Hive to be attacked to prove it is the legitimate thing. And on the flip side, whatever it is that they're going to build, I still have a lot of confidence that there's going to be a Google censorship layer. There's going to be a Facebook censorship layer in there at some point.
Yeah,
Maybe I'm
it's gonna be
wrong.
censorship via the nodes. You're gonna get banned
Yeah,
from the Google node, and then you're like, oh, well, I have to run my own node, and it's like running a lifeboat on the side of the Titanic, and you're just
yeah,
not gonna be able to compete or keep up.
yeah. Correct. Whereas the idea would be, this is what the Speak Network's doing. I mean, this is. I still think we're ahead of the game with this. We built the Speak Network. We designed the Speak Network years ago now, and we're currently rolling it out over the next sort of 6 months or so. And it effectively, the principle is that it's an autonomous layer that rewards the infrastructure providers. It doesn't care who the infrastructure providers are, as long as those infrastructure providers can prove that they're providing the infrastructure and providing the storage and providing the content delivery and providing the encoder systems. The protocol will reward them with value tokens in the form of Braca and governance tokens in the form of Speak, and so they will actually become part owners. And the Lightning Network and what it is that Jack's building cannot do that. It cannot possibly do that. So the only thing that they can be doing is mining information effectively. I don't see how else they can make their node sustainable.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if there's no incentive layer, the only reason you use their node is it's the same model. They know that people don't care. They're willing to give up their data for quote unquote free, even though it's really like they're negative thousands and thousands of dollars because their data is very expensive. They just don't know it. So they're playing off the naive, being naive and saying, "Oh, welcome to Web 3. You can send this NFT and you can interact and there's crypto and all this, but you just have to log on to our node. Oh, by the way, you can run your own node, decentralization, hashtag Web 5, blah blah blah." But we all know in practice that's never going to happen. And it seems like you could say we're so far ahead that they're actually copying us, which it feels like. But when you really game theory this thing down, they're not stupid people. There's only one way to do it. And that's the way we're doing it. It's the way Hive's doing it. It's the way, if you're talking about a practical way, off-chain storage, off-chain indexer, having them all communicate, having them all synergize. Like, regardless of how you get there technically, that's the end goal for whatever Web 3, Web 5, whatever it's bastardized the name now. The only problem is we see it, we understand it, we know what real censorship resistance is. So it's like we're mechanics, and they're coming out and they're taking like a piece of the motor out. It's like, well, you can't do that. So oh, it's still going to run, car 5 hashtag. It's like, no, it's not. We know what you're doing. You're trying to sabotage. You're taking out the little bit that can actually make it censorship resistance. That's not by mistake. You didn't just do that by accident. That was planned. We know exactly what you're doing. You're taking the blueprint that was made by a community, and you're taking out our power, and you're replacing it with you and more like you. So it's just very blatant at this point. It feels like it's sprinting time. It feels like the gloves are on now.
Yeah, sure. And I think, how can you have a truly free internet when you don't have an autonomous way to reward the infrastructure providers with ownership, right?
Hmm.
Those are the value creators. Those are the people that should create the value, that provide the value in the ecosystem, that keep it together, and they should be allowed to decide governance decisions and set variables within the ecosystem. Um, I mean, I guess you could argue from their point of view that if your node becomes popular and you're providing that infrastructure, then you effectively have the governance vote from that point of view because you have the user base. But no, I don't think that's the right way. I don't think, because the idea behind incentivizing autonomously the infrastructure providers is that it levels the playing field, right? Anyone can get involved, and the community votes for the infrastructure providers. So it's a bottom up run system, whereas this can very easily become a top down run system because they'll just take their user base and say, oh, we have the users, so we're going to do whatever we want on our node, and you're going to pay with your information. We'll see. It'll become more apparent as this rolls out. I'm very interested to see what it looks like.
You can, it's kind of funny. You can look at what's happening. Okay, the technology is becoming more and more mobile, more and more anti-infrastructure friendly, right? It's harder to run CDN from your phone. It's harder to do anything from your phone. Desktop computers are getting phased out. But if you think about Bitcoin, nobody needed graphics cards unless they were a hardcore gamer. But now graphics cards are sold out. Why? Because there's an incentive to mine Bitcoin. So these desktop computers are going to be like Bitcoin miners. They're going to buy them just to mine, and that's what these old clunky desktop computers are going to go. But you're not going to have somebody go buy an old clunky desktop computer to mine if they're not going to earn anything, and they know there's no way they can earn anything unless they become like a Google and get a giant node and get a bunch of
Mm-hmm.
traffic, which costs money. So it's like the old Web2 model of, oh well, we're going to be broke for a while, get a mass adopted app, and then sell on the back end. Well, you need investment to do that, to keep the lights on. So they're literally strangling it. They're making it to where the shift is, oh, we're on cell phones, no incentive to mine. The only people who do have incentives to mine are the big centralizing companies that want your data. That's exactly what they're doing. And if you look at it on paper, that's exact outcome. So now it's obvious what's happening, and people just need to wake up to it and not fall for the same trap. It's not Web 5. It's not even Web 3. It's Web 2.5. The people are out of there. They need to divide their Web 5 by two, and then they'll have the right.
Yes, that's what we need to get that out there. It's still Web 2.5, guys. You need to divide Web 5 by 2 and you get back to where it really is. It's not Web 3, it's Web 2.5. Well, I'm excited to see how it goes anyway. Certainly, it's going to give us food for thought as well. And maybe we'll even improve what we're doing based on some of the things that they do. I'm certainly interested to see if we can integrate it somehow as well. I've got no problem with people with those types of accounts using the apps and things that have been built on Hive and Speak Network. I'm blockchain agnostic. I don't mind. But certainly, it's all going to come back down to, has the community got a way to provide value back to the community and receive governance rights as a result? I still think that's the key thing here. And Bitcoin can't do that. So we'll see.